I need to give you a warning here because this podcast contains some very distressing, graphic accounts of violent events.
And I look up and then there's just this guy there at the top of the stairs, just in a full tracksuit with his hood up, with a knife, and it's like he maybe didn't realise that I was going to be in there, but we've looked at each other, then he's scurried off to the side.
That was Joel Verite talking about the moment he confronted the Southport knife attacker. We'll be hearing more from that extraordinary interview with him later on. Now, we cover a lot of stories here at Sky News, but this one has been especially difficult. I've been watching the news coverage like everybody else, and the stories that have been coming out of Southport have been so overwhelming, it's almost been difficult to comprehend. I've been thinking about the families, the trauma that they're going to be experiencing, the community, the shock and devastation that they're going to be feeling, and of course the emergency services who turn up to a scene of complete horror and then just have to roll up their sleeves and get on with the job. I'm Liz Bates, and today on The Daily we're going to be talking about Southport, that knife attack and the impact that that's going to have on those involved in the coming days, weeks and months, and asking how they can even start to process what has happened to them. So to understand a bit more about the community where it happened and the scale of that operation on Monday, let's speak to our correspondent Ashna Hurynag, who's there. Ashna, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, and the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, have been down there today to offer their support. Just give us a sense of what the atmosphere is like there at the moment.
Liz, it's a really heartbreaking place to be. It's a really quiet, gentle seaside resort is Southport. So lots of people have been telling me, look, you either come here to retire or you come here to raise your family by the seaside. And so everyone here is super friendly, super nice. There's a local pub, there's loads of businesses, a bit of a mix of people, mostly families. And the space where this awful attack happened is somewhere that loads of people go to because it's such a community space. Say like expectant mothers might have been there for classes, maybe parents have been there with their youngsters, and it's used so frequently by lots of dance classes too, which is why when people heard where this had happened, it really struck a chord with people because instantly people knew that vulnerable people use this space, and there is a palpable sense of shock. Certainly waking up this morning and coming down here, it's a really quiet street, but what stands out the most is clearly the cordon and the road closures and the officers that are standing by it, but also just what I can only describe as a sea of flowers, really. And this pool of bouquets and cards and cuddly toys is growing hour by hour. And people are just coming because they don't know where else to go. They know they want to send their love and their condolences in some way, but they just are so shocked and so traumatised by what's happened. They want to feel connected to the people at the heart of it, and they want to be able to express their condolences. But reading some of them, they're harrowing to read, and it really brings home when you see those cuddly toys and you see all of the families coming up to the cordon. I'm looking at it now. You see those families coming up to the cordon, hand in hand, arm in arm, with their little ones clutching their parents' arms, and the other hand they're holding either a bouquet of flowers or a cuddly toy. It just breaks your heart. The fact it involves primary school children, it's really shaken people here.
Obviously, one aspect of what went on here was that when this was all unfolding, in the first few minutes, few hours, people in the community rushed out to try to get involved and to protect the children. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, we understand that so tight-knit is this community that when the Taylor Swift music stopped playing or something had kind of pierced through that music, and those were screams and cries from people in the immediate few seconds after it happening. One person was calling the emergency services, another was saying to his colleagues, get down here now. One person was running in with no kind of defensive equipment, just his hands, and was just taking these young people out of that room and laying them on the ground so that they could get the medical attention that they needed. People were just so desperate to help.
Absolutely, and one of those people that did rush in to help was a man called Joel Verite. He's been speaking to another of our reporters that's on the ground in Southport, Shingi Mararike. It's a compelling, jaw-dropping and actually quite distressing interview. We felt that you had to hear it. So here's Joel Verite.
We were driving down Hart Street and then all of a sudden he slammed on the middle of the road and said, "Have you seen that?" I said, "No." He reverses the van back, and then all I see from my side was literally half a head from a girl hanging from the side of a car. So I jump out the car and I go up to her and I just ask her if she's all right, and she just looked in complete shock. She had blood all over her body, and she just screamed at me. She said, "He's killing kids over there. He's killing kids over there." She gets up, it's like she used all of her energy to point to us where this was happening, and then she completely collapses onto the floor. I'm running, I get to the car park, and as I'm running towards the door, there's a car, which is a woman's in the car, and she's beeping her horn and she's screaming for me to come over. So I run straight over to the car, and it's just a middle-aged woman, and she's got, I presume, her child in the passenger seat, and then in the back there's like 4 or 5 more kids, all in the back, covered in blood. It was like a scene of what you'd see on like a disaster film, honestly. And she just looked at me, the woman, and she said, "Honestly, love, I just want to make sure these kids are safe. I'm just going to park on the road. Please, can you get this girl out?" On the driver's side, behind the driver's seat, I open the door, and honestly, like, there's this girl, which will probably stay with me for the rest of my life, and she was completely out of it. I can't explain to you how horrific it is what I saw, but I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know what to think. I just wanted to get her out of the car and try and get her to safety. So I've just got this girl out of the car, and I've ran towards the road, and I'm shouting and I'm screaming for help. Someone ring the ambulance, and we put her down. Me and Martin put her down. Then Martin stays with this girl then, and then I run back in. I run back into the car park, and I basically run towards the door which is the entrance and the exit out to the dance studio. And you get there, and it's like the building's like an L shape, and you've got the gym where I used to go to upstairs, and there was 2 men in this bit here. They just looked completely shook up and frightened, and they're pointing to this dance studio saying, "He's in there, mate, he's in there." So I open the door downstairs, and as you go in, there's just a stairway which goes up, and there's a landing at the top, and then which goes through to, I presume, the dance studio. So I just remember opening the door, and I was shouting hello, just see if anyone was there. And then I remember just taking a step on. I remember go onto the stairs, and I look up, and then there's just this guy there at the top of the stairs, just in a full tracksuit with his hood up, with a knife, and it's like he maybe didn't realise that I was going to be in there, but we've looked at each other, then he's scurried off to the side.
And you locked eyes with this man? You looked at him?
I looked at this guy, yeah.
At that point, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking things which I'm not allowed to be saying on Sky News right now, but honestly, I just wanted to hurt him so bad, but at the same time, I was scared for myself, and I was just wanted to be up there to help anyone who was up there. He scurried off. I've come outside, and then I've been screaming then because I know where he is. I'm trying to get everyone to come to the door. We were there for a good 10 minutes before any police arrived, which felt like a lifetime. I'm completely hectic now because I've seen the guy, and I know he's up there. One police car finally turns up, and I'm screaming, "He's down there, he's down there." He just gets out where I am, and then he runs with me to the door. We run straight to the door, and then we get to the doorway, and then he said we've got to wait for backup, got to wait for someone else to come there because he only had a baton on him. And then his colleague came with a taser, and then he comes in front. So these 2 police officers go up the stairs, then I'm right behind them. They tackle this guy down to the floor. Straight away, there was no kind of fight at all. They just tackle him down to the floor, and I've grabbed this girl, and I'm walking down the stairs, and I start running towards the ambulance as soon as I get outside, and I'm sprinting towards the ambulance, and I put her down, with a medic, and then straight away the medics run her, the paramedics run her. When the police came there and we ran, and the suspect went down, it was kind of all done then, but the damage had been done. Seeing these children in that position, these children weren't crying. They were absolutely terrified. And then when these parents start turning up towards the end, because they're there to pick their children up from a Taylor Swift holiday club, and they're turning up and they're in absolutely hysterics. They're screaming, they're crying. They want to go into the building. They're not allowed to now because it's a crime scene. I'm still processing it in my head as well now because it only happened yesterday. I just feel completely shook up of what's gone on, to be fair. I'm just really upset for all the parents and all the children who had to go through that yesterday.
You ran towards danger. Do you consider yourself, I know you probably wouldn't label yourself as such, but you consider yourself a hero? What you did is not...
I know. Honestly, so many people have messaged me saying that, and I'm not going to label myself a hero at all. I just done what I felt was right in the moment. I think back to it and I think, what if I actually, because we were doing windows, see, what if I ran in and got the pole from the van, and what if I went and done all this? But in the heat of the moment, you know, you can just do what you feel is right. And when I got to that point, when I was on the steps and I looked at him and I just thought, if I go up there, you know, what's to say there's not another man there? Or what to say that he gets lucky and he gets me, then I've lost my life then. So but that's what I'm questioning in my head now. Maybe if I ran up, things could have been differently, do you know what I mean? But I'm happy that I've done what I've done.
Thank you to Ashna and Shingy. Now seems like a good time to take a breath, take a break. After that, we'll hear from a man who knows firsthand how important it is to support emergency service workers after they've dealt with something as traumatic as these types of events. Welcome back. So the head of the ambulance service in the North West has said what happened in Southport will leave a lasting impact on the whole community after dozens of his team were called to the dance class. Merseyside's Chief Constable spoke about a ferocious attack, and we just want to try to understand how you even start to try and deal with something like this in the days, weeks and months ahead. Gary is co-founder and CEO of the charity PTSD 999. It's an organisation providing support to those suffering with PTSD from their time spent working in our emergency services, and it's something he has had first-hand experience of. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us today, Gary. Your story's pretty amazing. So you are the founder of a charity, PTSD 999, and that is because of an experience that you went through in 2005, I think working for the British Transport Police and turning up on the scene of the 7/7 London bombing. Tell us a bit about your experience and how you came to set up the charity.
I was a British Transport Police officer. 2005 came along. We had the 2005 London bombings. I found myself posted to the temporary mortuary to assist with the identification of the victims of that terrorist attack. That was the start of a very difficult time for me because of the PTSD that I didn't realise that I may have been suffering from. And obviously back to normal policing duties after that event, involving, unfortunately, lots of repeated trauma, you know, suicide on the railway, policing duties at its worst with, you know, stabbings, etc. But there was not a great deal of help in relation to mental health and well-being at that time.
Obviously, you know, as part of your job, and this is the same for a lot of people that work in emergency services, you have to deal with some pretty horrific scenes. What's it like to turn up to a scene like that?
You can imagine the absolute horror for all of the emergency services personnel that took part in responding to yesterday's dreadful incident. And on top of that, you need to look at the effect that the people in the background, the impact it would have had on them. The call takers, for me, the very unsung heroes of today's modern emergency services, because they're the people that take those initial calls. And you can only begin to imagine how distressing that must have been for the call takers, receiving those calls from neighbours, frantic parents, and obviously getting updates from officers on scene. And then you've got to look at the civilian people that were involved within this incident as well, those that rushed in to help. It has a huge impact on the personnel on scene. You sort of go into almost robot mode. You just get on with it. You normalise something that quite clearly isn't normal. And it's not until after the event when things start to sort of sink in. People have this idea in their heads that immediately people will be affected by what they're seeing and what they're dealing with. It may be days, weeks, months, if not years later, when the events of yesterday might start affecting the personnel that were there because they've not spoken about it, they've not been encouraged to speak about what they've dealt with and what they've seen and what they've heard. No matter what training you have, it cannot prepare you for something as these officers are dealing with currently. Now, whether they have a debrief afterwards, I'd like to think there will be a hot debrief for the officers just to encourage them to speak up if they've got any issues from what they've dealt with, not to bury it and take it home with them. The best thing they can do is talk, because guilt will stay with these officers forever and a day. You know, you go to jobs and often you're reacting to an incident that's already happened. So you're getting there post incident and you'll do your level best to ensure that you've done everything textbooked as you can. However, you will always question yourself at the end of the day. I know I did in relation to what we did in the temporary mortuary. You know, I blame myself quite considerably for the loss of life, because I was part of a specialist team that should have been there to prevent it, but we couldn't. And the officers there today and yesterday and for the days coming, they will all be parents, most of them. They will all have young children, and this will really impact on them.
Yeah, and I think I've heard your story before, and I think one of the moments for you was seeing a child and seeing a note from a father to a child. And obviously that's what these workers are dealing with in Southport, children. I mean, potentially the worst kind of scenario that you can deal with. Can you tell us a bit about your experience and how that affected you?
Absolutely. I think, you know, as a member of the emergency services, you're expected just to crack on and deal with stuff and almost remove your heart, just turn up with your badge and uniform, and that's the expectation from the general populace. It's your job and it's what you do. But we are all human. And for me, whilst I was in the temporary mortuary, one of my duties, besides helping to identify the victims and what was left of the bomb, was like to take the deceased through to a family viewing area. And I sort of put a lot of safeguarding in for myself, because my wife had just had our third son, and had he come around the due date given prior to him being born, we've worked it out that my wife would have been on that Aldgate train that went up. There was a fine timeline of about a minute or so, because she would have been going to work via Aldgate station herself on that day. Thankfully, our little fella came a bit earlier than expected. So when I was in the mortuary and I took one of the youngest victims through to the family viewing area, I was informed en route by a member of staff that this young fella's dad was coming to view and pay his respects, and apparently had just lost his wife, and this was his only child. So straight away, I've had too much information given to me. After the viewing, I liaised with the family liaison officer. Again, these people will be with families as we speak, helping them through this terrible, terrible time. And we had a brief conversation. I went back into the viewing area, and as I'd done with everyone else that I'd taken into that place of rest, collected flowers, gifts, and cards and placed them into the body bags, and then taken the deceased back to their place of rest for that time they were with us. On this occasion, I have no idea why I did it, but I just caught sight of what this gentleman had written on his bereavement card to his son.
It still makes you emotional.
Excuse me. And that has stayed with me forever. And I got to a point, excuse me,
Don't worry.
where I just started drinking heavily. You know, went back to sort of what we would consider normal policing duties. But that was burned into my head. Those simple words from a bereaved dad to his only child, and I hit a real low, to the point where I went to take my own life. Thankfully, I didn't succeed, and on a realisation of that, we set up PTSD 999 to try and help and guide our emergency workers through difficult times, and just to let them know that there are people out there that care, that will listen, and will help them through some very, very bleak times.
In those days and weeks after, what you'd been through, you weren't getting the right support. What is the right type of support that people that have been through that experience need, thinking about those workers in Southport right now?
So I think straight away, it's the acknowledgement of what they've dealt with is not normal. It's far from normal. And those individuals should be treated as such, because trauma is very specific to everyone. I would encourage the services in that part of the country to really sit down and talk with the individual officers, to reassure them, to let them know that should they need to talk to someone about how they're feeling, about their mental health, there is someone there. This is an absolutely horrific experience for everyone involved, including, dare we say, your good selves reporting on this incident. It's just absolutely shocking. There needs to be somewhere that you can go confidently and be reassured that you can talk to someone. In the days to come or the weeks to come, there will be a moment where they reflect. They might just sit there and break down in floods of tears. I did it many times and couldn't understand why. And it was just a build up of all those emotions, because I was, as a man, I was too proud to talk to anyone, because apparently I was a strong-minded individual, a leader, and everything else. And I couldn't let anyone think that I was being weak or I couldn't deal with what we dealt with. But I would encourage the men and women, both on the front line yesterday and those in the call taking centres, the scenes of crimes officers, everyone involved, that they reach out and talk to someone.
Well, Gary, I'm completely in awe of your strength and what you do, and thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity, and can I just finish by giving our sincere condolences to the families that have lost their little ones and to those that have been injured, and my thanks to everyone that attended that scene and did their absolute best. That they are heroes in my eyes, every one of them. Thank you.
That's all for this edition of The Daily. But if there's one thing we want you to take away from this podcast today, it's if you've been affected by anything that we've spoken about, please do reach out and ask for help. There are charities that can help you, like Samaritans or Mind. Thank you so much for listening, and join us again tomorrow.